Well, I want to begin by bringing us on a little time journey back in time. Just over 10 years ago, I started to look at Popeye stock, and I knew about the brand. I had followed when it was a part of a conglomerate, and they had sold all these assets, and they made a big shareholder distribution, and then there was some board turnover, and the shareholders just had Popeyes left. And when you look at a franchise business, one thing that you always do is you go talk to the franchisees. It's like they're the backbone of the business, and they can really, tell you how the company ticks and how it makes money. So this is probably early 2008. I call up this franchisee in Florida, one of the biggest in the system, and I was like, my name is Jeff Gramm. I run a hedge fund. I want to talk to you about Popeyes. I'm not going to ask you anything that you can't tell me, but would you be willing to talk to me about the business? There's this long pause on the phone, and then I just hear this guy go, "You wouldn't like what you heard." Click. And Popeyes had been, they had been struggling. They had probably had 5 to 10 years of declining guest counts and declining sales. And I think from that point, the stock appreciated maybe 10 to 15x. And one thing that everyone in my business wants to know is, how do you do it?
Well, this is really fun for me. You don't often get to be interviewed by one of your shareholders. We had a good run together, didn't we?
Yeah.
So, I know exactly who you called, and I know exactly why you said that. The day I joined the company, they'd had 7 years of declining sales, guest counts, and restaurant profitability. They had had 4 CEOs, revolving door, and the emotions in the franchisee system were frustrated, mad, desperate, really, for a team that might understand the business model and how it worked. It's really quite simple. Is this going in and out? Okay. So the business model, if you don't know franchising, is the franchisee makes all the investment. They build the building, hire the people, train the people, sell the food, and build a relationship in their community. So to not pay attention to that is to not understand how the value is created. And the reason I've always liked this guy is because of what he did. I told every shareholder for 10 years to call my franchise owners. And if they thought our leadership was good, then our stock was going to probably perform. Jeff was ahead of the game in doing that. But that really is the way the model works. The franchisor collects a percentage of royalties, and they make most of their money on new store openings. A franchisee doesn't really open any stores if they don't have any unit economics and they don't perform. So you have to run the business model well for it to grow and for the enterprise to thrive.
One thing that I wanted to ask about, because we're in a room of financial investors and financially minded folks, is for the 9 or 10 years that you're executing this turnaround, you're doing everything that you can operationally, but at the same time, you're fielding all of these financial questions. And the one thing that I always am interested to hear CEOs talk about is, what do you think the shareholders got wrong? If you had any complaints about the trees they were barking up or the questions that they were asking, what would you say those were?
Well, I'll tell you, one of the things I thought was the hallmark of our management team was a leadership approach called servant leadership. And I remember being on a panel like this in New York. Nicole from Piper Jaffray was interviewing me. And somebody about the age of my child said, that's an analyst, right? About 26, 27. So this analyst raises his hand and he says, "Why do you talk about that all the time?" Kind of in an annoyed voice. And I said, "Because I believe it creates performance results for people like you. And I really do believe that. What we tried to create was an enterprise where the business owners thrived and where the employees thrived. So the answer to your question in my mind is the shareholder underestimates human capital. They focus everything on financial capital. And the humans are the ones that turn that into something of value. And so I truly believe that leaders who create a workplace where people thrive. Now, what does that mean? Everybody thinks it's soft and fuzzy and huggy, but it's really quite concrete. There's a lot of research on that. Gallup, for example, engagement. They've been writing since 2001, that's now a fairly long time ago, they've been writing that a highly engaged workforce produces superior financial results. And we all read the books and we all go hurrah and we all don't do it. Because what doing it is it's setting clear expectations, it's communicating regularly with your people, letting them know what the enterprise is trying to accomplish, it's coaching, it's development, it's giving people growth opportunities. People want to work for a purpose and they want to work for someone who cares about them and they want to be invested in and reach more of their potential. And when people at meetings look at me sideways about that, I say, well, what is it you want from your boss? And then it gets really quiet, right? Because we know what a good boss is and we know what our best employer has done for us in our career. They've taken risks on us, they've promoted us, they've given us opportunities, so we know what good is. The question is whether we're willing to do it for others. And so I think the market grossly underestimates talent, and the other word that's always used side by side is culture, and all that means is creating a place where people can perform their best work. That's what culture is.
Well, I hate to say it, that 26-year-old could probably have been a fund manager in this day and age,
Yeah.
so you never know.
Lots of them, or an activist.
Yeah, exactly. The next activist. But one thing that I remember you talking about at an investor day, and it just came to me when we were talking earlier about using data in the retail business, was people were asking about when Popeyes would trial new promotions and new menu items.
Yeah.
And they would ask about, if you guys are having so much success like these things, why do we see, companies like KFC routinely do trials that seem successful and then they push them out and they fail. And at the time, you made this point about how people, they have the data, but it's easy for them to ignore it. And the one question that I wanted to ask along those lines that came to me as you were talking about good leadership is, it seems like, there's a tremendous amount of executive talent. Mm-hmm. And, when mistakes are made in big public companies and big organizations, why does that happen?
There's probably no simple answer except we all make mistakes, right? So it isn't a flawless exercise ever. Business is all about risk-taking, and that's not 100% gain. So you have to try things, you have to take risks. In our new product innovation, we created a process where every quarter, along with chefs, a group of chefs, we created 80 to 100 new product ideas. And then we took them through concept screens online, and then we created the products and had people eat them and see if they were any good. Out of that, though, we only took 4 products to test market in that quarter, and we only took 1 of them nationally. So we had a real discipline around pushing the ideas through a testing process. I think one of the reasons we were talking about kind of gut out in the hallway. A lot of leaders think gut is one of their greatest skills, and we were joking that it's really called stupidity, because when you have the availability of facts, you should look at them, you should learn from them, you should listen to them, particularly if they're your customers, right? Because intuition can really serve you wrong. So I think listening skills is one to watch for, is whether people think they always have the answer or whether they really do go to the customer for insight. And I would tell you, most of the CEOs I meet haven't been in a group of their customers very recently, haven't put a set on customer complaints center really aren't very connected to the customer.
Well, I know that we have a sophisticated audience here, so I really do want to get to the Q&A as quickly as possible. And to the extent that we don't have questions, then
We'll keep talking.
then I'll facilitate with some more of this. But the last one from me for now is, you've obviously been at the highest level, both as a director and as a CEO. And I'd love to like to hear you kind of compare and contrast those two roles within a public company. Like, what makes a good CEO? What makes a good director? And how those might differ.
So I think the topic I would talk about on both those fronts is courage. I was thinking this morning about, I'm currently serving as an interim CEO, so we're in a search for a permanent CEO. And I'm looking for courage of convictions, because to be a public or private company CEO, you have to do your homework, create your plan, and then you have to bring it to life for all the constituents. And it takes courage to have a bold plan for an enterprise, a high-risk plan in most cases. I only do turnarounds, so they're always high risk. And the whole world, shareholders, all your stakeholders are looking in your eyes to say, do I see the courage of her convictions? So I think for a CEO, that's critical. The bridge I'd make to the boardroom, if I was writing a book like you just did about the boardroom, the title of it would be The Death of Courage. Here's what happens in the boardroom, and I'm looking around the room, and I don't think any of you are old enough for me to insult you, but in the boardroom, you're mature, let's use that word. You're mature, you're often retired, you have high reputation, and you have now become a low-risk business person because of your reputation. The last thing you want on your resume is a shareholder lawsuit, a bad headline, a failed CEO. And if you're going to serve in the boardroom, I want to really challenge you to not let your guard down and let your risk profile decline. It's really dangerous to business. You're asking the leadership team to create a high turnaround plan, for example, a high risk turnaround, and you're going to lose heart halfway through it. Makes my head spin. I had a board say to me at one time, your plan has executional risk. And I looked back and I said, what day wasn't that true? A board member said, well, how do you know that's going to happen in 5 years? And I said, I've never known it was going to happen in 5 years. I mean, you just got to do this stuff. You can't be sure. So please don't get governed by low risk in the boardroom. It's really dangerous. The decisions you make will be flawed if you do that. You will. There is no safe place in business or any kind of leadership. So don't become safe in the boardroom.
So who has the courage
To ask a
to ask
question.
the first question?
I have a question just about leadership, and when you have an executive management team might be approaching the business from they don't want to take risks. And when you're working in that environment, how would you respond to that environment as like someone that's reporting on leadership?
Well, right now I'm CEO of Pier 1 Imports in Fort Worth, and if you read any headlines about that, we're in a turnaround situation. And I've been recruiting talent. I hired a general counsel and a CIO. And in both interviews, I remember looking at them and saying, you don't look scared, and I love that. I mean, you can't go into, we call it running into burning buildings, turnarounds, right? You have to enjoy that. You have to enjoy running into burning buildings. So I think I really look for that trait in leaders of not crazy. I'm not talking about crazy risk, but I'm talking about considered, bold thinking around the business and what it can do. Focus is even courageous today, right? We tend to get kind of all distracted by 128 things when you really need to do 3 or 4 basic things well in business. It takes courage to be disciplined and focused in that way. So I have multiple definitions of courage, but maybe the most important is around your convictions and your values. I really look for people who know why they believe what they believe and how that's going to show up at work and how those values are going to govern their actions. And you'd be amazed how many people you interview that you say, what value or conviction is behind that thought, and they just stare at you. They haven't thought about it. And so I think it's a really telling way to get to know people, is to really ask them what they think about, what's important in their value scheme, and how that will show up in the workplace. Skills are easier to measure than that.
Hi, I just have one question about your thoughts on how we can improve diversity
Diversity?
in the C-suite and boardroom, and also close the pay gap that we all have been talking about.
Questions around diversity and the pay gap that is with diversity. The reason I'm interim at Pier 1 is I've been on their board 7 years, and we're one of the few public boards in America that's half and half, male-female, for example. I'll tell you what I've learned about diversity in the boardroom is it's jumping in with more than one token individual. I've counseled every board I've talked to, if they decide they want women in the boardroom, to put 3 in the boardroom. And I generally refuse to be their first and only woman because I really can't stand that rule. The reason for that is when a woman comes in a boardroom alone, they assume she represents all womankind. Now women, are we all alike? Are we? No. We're not, men aren't alike, women aren't alike. I don't know where we get that idea. But they say, oh, you're the consumer, you must know paint colors. And I'm like, really? That was at True Value Hardware. You know, they were all plumbers and sprinkler guys, and I was the paint color girl. I really think the way you get diversity is by viewing it as half the population and hiring towards that. And in fact, I did a piece of research with the Gallup organization that says that's true. The highest performing executive teams and boards are 50-50. Pay diversity. The good thing about pay is it's becoming transparent. The compensation committee is governed by rules. They have to look at market rates. Everybody has to be paid the same. So I think the market's going to correct that, particularly in senior management, and that'll filter down as it gets more scrutiny. It's at least more visible.
So, in your opinion, what's the best way to compensate CEOs and senior management to align them with shareholders and remove agency problems? You talked about, it was very interesting to talk about how the people on the board are usually older and risk averse.
Yeah.
How do you set up the compensation structure of the CEO to make them react the way the shareholders would like them to?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of incentive pay. It's the reason why I took the Popeyes job. I was sitting on their board and they offered the job to somebody else, and he didn't take it, but I'd seen the pay package. And I thought, that's really interesting because it was really rich on incentive pay. Very aligned with the shareholders. They did a grid where if the stock was $25, you made this much. If it was 30, you made this. If it was 35, and the stock was 11. You know, it's kind of, I thought, well, that may never pay, but if it did. So very aligned with the shareholder, and we came in at 11 and sold at 79. So I'm a total fan of that. For everyone, not just for me.
I think also just, compensation is a great example of how, in any given business, there's like, there are particular, metrics that are relevant. There are, particular ways for the comp committee to design a plan like that works for the executive and like, that works like to really drive the right performance. And, it's a telltale sign like, when you see comp plans like that don't have that thoughtfulness behind it.
I couldn't figure out which one of you to ask which part of this, so I'll throw it out.
Okay.
And y'all can answer how you think fit. This might be a little inside baseball, but as restaurant people and investor people, I'm wondering, how would you evaluate the quality of management if you were in our seats? And then also the strength of a concept, restaurant concept to restaurant concept.
Okay. So my whole background is branding. I really believe that brands are powerful assets and it's measurable. Most of the turnarounds I've stepped into, I've believed in the brand and that it could be relevant, distinctive, and contemporary again. But you got to know what the consumer thinks about your brand, what its core essence is. So I would look for companies that had visibility into how the customer views their brand. Like Pier 1 has a zealot customer base, just zealot. Women who can't wait to get in there and talk to an associate and arrange their table for Thanksgiving. I mean, and so there's a passion and engagement that you don't see with all brands. So I would really hunt for the data on customer engagement to the brand and what is it about the brand that's truly white space distinctive. For example, at Pier 1, our competitor's Home Goods. Our associates at Pier 1, our retention's really high. Our 12-hour employees have been with us over 12 years. At Home Goods, if you trip over an employee, they're opening a box and they say, "Why did you trip over me?" It's really distinctive to have people that know your business, know the category and can help you with your sale. So I'd really look for that data. And the other question was about management.
Right.
So I think one of the key things to look for, and this certainly happens between Jeff and I, is communication and transparency. Do they look you in the eye and tell you the truth? I think it might be the most important thing, particularly in a shareholder relationship. Jeff and I saw each other every quarter for 8 years, I think. We're friends. We talk to each other on Twitter. We knew each other. And I would tell you, I knew all my top 10 investors. I listened to them. I took some of the decisions they recommended to me and did them. One of them, I remember him telling me he was really surprised I did what he suggested. And I said, "Well, why? You were talking about it for 6 years. I finally listened to you." So, you want to see rapport and transparency. And I think the way we've set up public companies, it's hard to get that. And you really have to have your antenna up to see that. But if you go to ICR in Florida and walk around all the meetings, I can peg the transparent ones, right? They stand and they talk to you. What's on their mind? What keeps them up at night? They're honest, straightforward.
I think that's exactly right. When you're investing in public companies and you're dealing with very limited information, that you only have so much to go on. And CEOs can be very good at telling you what you want to hear. They're very good at using the language of the public company investor. And so to really know the ones that you feel like you're getting. I hate to use this word, the truth, because you don't want to say that lots of managers are not truthful, but it's the right word, the ones that that you're getting the straight dope from. It just takes time. It's you have to learn, how they operate, and and you can't just look at good performance and say, well, this company has put up X years of this return on capital, and so thus this is a good business and this is a good CEO. The one thing I've learned from investing in public companies is just how fleeting those things can be, and it's easy to kind of ascribe performance to a CEO or what we would call a moat around the business that isn't really there. And then in terms of evaluating a restaurant concept, it's a little bit the same thing. It's if you're just going on the public information, then you're beginning with the kind of the unit level annual volumes on how they're performing, so if Chick-fil-A is doing 3.5 million, that it's great. And but does that mean that when Popeyes was doing 900, that it wasn't? So there's all these other holes that you have to fill with your research. And so that's the hard part.
And that's one thing I appreciate about you and a couple of our other top 10 is how much homework you did. I had a couple analysts like you that really did homework. Nicole at Piper Jeffrey, her models were better than mine. You know, so I really value that hard work on the other side too, that really takes an interest and digs in and wants to learn and channel checks, calls your franchisees. That tells you you're dealing with a smart investor too, or a smart analyst.
Thank you.
It's a lot of pressure to pick who's next when they're.
Well, you have to
so
pick
many
her.
hands up. Okay,
Yeah,
fine.
Stuart, because I'm feeling guilty she doesn't have her.
You said it yourself, you only do turnarounds.
Mhm.
Could you speak a little bit to kind of your playbook? And obviously each one is different, but you have to get in there and make some quick decisions about what you're going to focus on first. And we just would love to hear about that.
Sure. I have a 3-part plan, and I wrote a book 3 years before he did about it, so we've talked about it a few times, but it's memorable. Dare, serve, perform are the 3 points. So the dare is about your business plan and having a courageous but plausible, ambitious plan. At Popeyes, our volumes, as he said, were 900,000. So the first meeting I said they need to be $1.2 million, and your restaurant operating profit needs to be 22. It was 17. And I said that's plausible because there are competitors doing that. We're behind the 8 ball. We need to take market share. We need to perform like a top-tier competitor performs. And then create the business plan below that idea to execute that well. In restaurants, there were 4 things. Your brand had to be working hard, your restaurant ops had to be good, you had to make money at the franchise level, and that entitled you to open new restaurants, and that was how we made money. So that was the 4 pillars of our plan. And then we had specifics. I won't take you through them all, but a specific would be the innovation plan I mentioned. Taking $45 million out of the supply chain, made them 2 more margin points at the store. Speeding up our drive-through was a throughput play, which is sales. And then we got our unit economics to the point that our new units opened at 30% cash-on-cash returns. They were 0 when I started. So, having real concrete plans to move metrics in each of those pillars. Because that's where your credibility comes from, right? In the end, is performance. The second thing, though, is I always talk about deciding who you're going to serve and measuring your success by their success. So my team was incented to improve the restaurant operating profit of our restaurants. Because if we did that, the model worked. And it changed all their behaviors. And so we would have discussions like this. The franchisees would come in for the quarterly planning meetings. And we could be argumentative and adversarial at those meetings, or we could listen. You always have the choice. In franchising, they're usually adversarial. So we learned and practiced how to not go into there with the wrong mindset. We failed sometimes. Sometimes we get all riled up. But one time I asked the franchisees, when are we at our best? And they said, when you come in this room without a PowerPoint presentation. And I'll tell you, my team had to really think about that. They'd gotten really comfortable coming in with their point of view and arguing for it. And a white, Post-it notepad made them sweat, right? To say, I just came to hear what you have on your mind. But we got better at that. So serving people well. And then I always talk about performance because I talk about serving. You can't serve an enterprise with the people well and not perform. That's impossible, right? There's no listless, declining firms laying people off that are fun to work at. And so, performing is part of your stewardship responsibility to serve.
Can I ask you one quick question? Sure. As you talk about that, it kind of brought to mind how difficult it must have been to sell the company, and particularly to sell it to a company with, kind of the reputation that it had. So off the record,
Yeah, right.
What was that experience like?
Heartbreaking, and I told them that, so that's public domain. It was heartbreaking. We were based here in Atlanta. The company's gone. All the employees are gone. And it was a really cool team. We had an incredible amount of fun and family along with producing results. So I think a lot of us were sad. There was a lot of blubbering at the end. And it was hard to think that was the right answer. And so, this is what I would challenge, people in your lane about is the highest price always the right answer? I know you well enough to know how you think about it, but in the public company world, that's kind of the rule. And I'm not there. I would be in the stakeholder model that shareholders should do well, but so should the employees and the franchisees. That would be my model.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard from our perspective because, especially if you invest in the smaller company end of things, you're so used to seeing badly governed companies lean on the stakeholders as their excuse for perpetuating bad governance. And that's like the hard part from our perspective is that it's easy to say, oh, well, we don't want to do X, Y, and Z because of the stakeholders, when often there's self-interest on the part of the CEO.
I understand that completely. You could use that argument wrongly. You could say, we're not going to grow fast because we like cozy. You could say, we're not going to do that for you because we like our employees better. I get that. But we're definitely at a point of imbalance. I've done a lot of research just to understand how we got here to kind of a pure price play. And it's actually, it's more our mindset than it is governance, because the rules actually do allow you to consider.
Yeah, there's a lot of leeway.
Yeah, there's a lot of leeway for a board. But we've kind of gotten to a cultural point of view that you really just leave everything on the table except the price.
Yeah, I mean, and you look at the Popeyes board, if anyone was going to, say no to the huge, premium, you had the credibility to do it, given your performance. So I think that you're right. Like there is this, that it is this, cultural, kind of determinist that like the best price doesn't win, like as a way that.
Well, and I'll switch to a less sensitive topic, which I was involved with an activist while at Popeyes, and came and went pretty quickly, and made a lot of money in our stock. But while he was there, he was always yelling at me, always writing me letters, always angry. Came in at $35, left at $55. I said, "Are you still angry?" But the mission statement on his website said, our mission is something to the effect of to produce excessive results, excessive shareholder results. And I called him, I said, what does that mean? How do you define excessive? And he got kind of quiet. And they took it off their website. Because I don't think he really wanted to explain that. So I view business leadership and board leadership as a stewardship responsibility, so I am a weirdo. But I really think we ought to think a little bit more about what we've been asked to steward and think a little bit less about maximum or excessive.
And if someone can tell me when we have to stop too, I'm not a watch wearer.
Maybe to elaborate on that last question, and then you know, on your points on brand, can a large group or management team manage multiple brands under one house? It's certainly a trend in restaurants. Is that possible? And then if you were to be handed that sort of job, how would you go about doing that, and how would you be effective with that?
Do you work for Inspire, We're in Atlanta. So only a few have really tried multi-branding restaurants, and there's some pros and cons. Probably true in any industry. If you get once you assemble multiple business units, it gets complex. The one I was very close to was Yum Brands. We had Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, KFC, and one of them was always in the ditch. And so it was like a rotating problem throughout the company. And then we tried putting them together in the same unit, like KFC, Taco Bell. That blend actually worked because both brands kind of survived in their own right. But if you put KFC with A&W root beer, you never made any money ever again. And so I haven't seen it execute well in the true retail partnership, except in food court type settings, right? But at the corporate level, I think what you have to really deliberate is, I'm not a big fan of the synergy word. So most of these are put together on a synergy principle that, it's great to share infrastructure back of a house, and that's somehow going to really help the brand thrive. But it often impedes brand performance because each business unit has kind of a different profile and a different set of success criteria. So you have to be very careful not to make them all vanilla and therefore all mediocre performers. That would be my challenge to a multi-brand group. The reason I said Inspire, I think Paul Brown's fabulous. He just begun the Inspire journey with Arby's, Sonic, and Buffalo Wild Wings. If you look up the Inspire website, you'll see the purpose and principles he's put out there for running a multi-brand. I give them a high probability of success, but they've been very thoughtful about it.
It's an interesting thought exercise because there are plenty of big corporations that can successfully run multiple business lines.
Yes.
And yet you see a lot of failures when, like you have multiple branches of the same business line.
How did you balance aggressively growing Popeyes with the obesity and paycheck to paycheck consumer? Just more ethically, how do you balance that?
Well, I guess it is a principle for me of personal responsibility. I love living in a free country where we get to make choices. We have free speech. We choose not only what we eat, but whether or not we drink alcohol, whether or not we smoke. I don't, but I'm glad that there's choice because I believe in individual responsibility. And so I have been challenged by that question in many, many public forums, including by Michelle Obama and a very large audience. And then she came over and ate chicken and french fries with me. Go to Oprah Winfrey, flew to Atlanta, and she said, will you not tell anybody, but I'm going to serve all the kids in the inner city school Popeyes, and the Secret Service is going to come watch you make it. And I'm like, okay, great. So, I want us to be a little bit more truthful about these things. Yes, I do not want America to have an obesity problem or a diabetic problem. None of those things. But I actually think we're going to have a hard time governing individual choice. We'd be better off working on the family structure, good habits, drink a lot of water, exercise. I'm a big fan, for example, the restaurant industry's been doing an activity-based health thing for a long time. Dance, run, be active. I don't deny it's a big part of the controversy around our industry, but I'll tell you what I feel great about when I go to bed at night is we turn lots of entry-level employees into managers, supervisors, and franchisees. And one of my favorite humans lives in Milwaukee and owns 35 restaurants, and he started as a fry cook in Chicago, south of Chicago. My other favorite franchisee is Lal Sultanzana. He was an Afghani immigrant with $2 in Harlem, New York. He's a multi-millionaire today from a fry cook. So I'm really proud of the careers we create in the restaurant and franchising business. One of the beautiful things, actually, most respected things about America is that we give people an opportunity to start their own business. So that's what I take pride in.
Was that John Broderson?
Yes,
The one- yeah.
that was one of your favorites. That's Milwaukee.
Yeah, the one thing that I would say is it's interesting that the restaurant industry has taken heed for this because there clearly is this a part of corporate America that has become capitalism is a big business that has become very good at manipulating their customers. You can look at the kidney like DaVita, and you can look at the multi-level marketing companies, and there's a lot of businesses where there kind of are some ethical questions about their business pursuits. But to me, it's when you have a restaurant it's like you're not manipulating your customer into choosing you. It's very much like a crowded industry of
Choices.
choice. But it's a good question, and it's a good thing to think about as, you know, big business gets more intertwined into all of our lives.
Yeah.
Do you want to pick the next one?
No, you're good.
Okay, it's hard. Let's go right here.
I
We'll
was
circle around.
Did you start out on board, in the boardroom, or did you start out as a CEO, and sort of what was that path?
Yeah, my first, I was a division business head at Yum running KFC restaurants, so that was my first general management job, but not a public company CEO. I got fired from that job, which most people forget, but that's where I learned all my lessons. And so I sat out for a couple of years and then decided board service would be my career. And Popeyes was one of my first boards. I'm now in my second job that came from board service, right? So it is sometimes the responsibility of the board to put a board member in to run the company. So that's how I got to Popeyes. I came off the board into the CEO for 10 years. And then I've been on Pier 1's board for 7 years and became the temporary CEO in December. I'm also on the U.S. Foods board in Chicago, and today I joined the Chick-fil-A board here in Atlanta. So I really think board service is a wonderful way to give back to business and use all the experience you've had to help another management team be successful. And so I encourage senior executives to, you have to get on a starter board. That was what True Value was for me. You have to get on a board that's kind of, I don't know, just a starter situation. That wasn't a public board, right? You got to learn your way through just like you do in management. But it's a great opportunity to give back.
Aside from being very vocal about steward leadership when you were at Popeyes, were there other ways that you highlighted your investments in human capital and culture? And also, do you think that public companies should be required to disclose some metric on their investments in human capital?
Yes, I'm a huge believer in metrics across all of your disciplines, but human capital has a lot of good metrics today that are easy to track. Engagement is one. Like any metric, it's as good as you use the data. So if you measure net promoter with your customers or engagement with your employees and do nothing with the data, it won't be very useful. But a company that action plans around that human capital data can make a huge difference. Typically, your engagement data tells you you're not setting clear expectations, you're not coaching and giving feedback, and you're not growing people. And then I can tell you the private story at Popeyes was when I told them we were going to do those three things, the senior team, they said, we don't have time for that. And that's pretty much the response of every executive team I've ever talked to about it. That's a really great idea, Cheryl, but we don't have time for it. And so I went over to Coca-Cola's HR department to one of their talented leaders, and I said, okay, I'm going to give them a time slot for human capital. And I said, what % of the week should I direct them to spend with their people? And she said 30%. So that's what we did. And that basically meant Monday, Tuesdays were people. You did your staff meetings and your one-on-ones, and then we traveled Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And I would tell you we changed the culture of the company, but one-on-one we did that. You know, people, you report, the person you report to is the one who changes your life, not the CEO. And so it was teaching people to do that. Now, did we have 100% effectiveness? No. No, we had plenty of people that decided they weren't going to do that. But we kept building capability and insisting on it and using talent management reviews to kind of, over time, weed out the people who didn't believe in that. It's a powerful thing. Other simple measures, retention, overlooked all the time. You know, if you have a high spend people environment, you never become good. You never get deep capability. Very measurable.
Do we have time for more?
What did you all disagree about or challenge each other on while you were invested in Popeyes and how those issues turned out?
I literally was a cheerleader. I mean, like, to be honest, like, things I brought up, I guess, like I always brought up, would have loved to have seen a dark meat
Every meeting.
chicken turnaround. Because I had this idea of this like evolving food taste, and well, Japanese fried chicken is boneless thighs. And then, I mean, I fell in more with the rest of the shareholder base on Popeyes. Like when I first owned it, like you weren't like allowed under the terms of your back agreement to do share repurchases.
Mhm.
And then a couple years in, 2 or 3 years in, I can't remember if you got a new bank deal.
Refinanced, yeah.
You were, and at that point, I was probably more in favor of just aggressive share repurchases,
Right.
like that you all were comfortable with. And but
Yeah, I would say that I remember both those discussions, the buys and the share repurchases. Franchising, because the cash flows are so strong, aggressive share repurchases, a huge favorite. But I did have another shareholder that every single meeting wanted a dividend and just asked me every single time wanted a dividend. And we held off and never did that. At one point, there was dissonance in my top 10 shareholders. They kind of all wanted something different. It was right around the time I hired Will Matt as our CFO, and we did an in-depth review of our capital structure, and we showed them the analysis on every option that they wanted us to do and why we were doing the ones we were. So I was really pleased with that work product and that dialogue, because rather than just blow them off and say, Jeff, you're wrong, Ken, you're wrong, Mary, you're wrong, we said, okay, we'll go do our homework and we'll come back. It did support our path. But if it hadn't, I would have listened to the data. So that's what I mean by a robust, open conversation with your investors. You should listen, unless they talk about a chicken thigh sandwich.
well, when I'm investing in a like succeeding turnaround in a growth company. I mean, like for me, it was often I was just trying to learn. What kind of.
You said don't screw up a lot. I remember that. You said
Well, that was-
don't mess it up. Don't mess
The
it
lady
up.
from Cardinal said that too. Like,
Yes.
that was
She
her
said
mantra.
that a lot.
She was great. But I have a funny. So we bought a lot of Popeyes at kind of the depths of the financial crisis, and then we sold almost the entire. I think that we even we'll sell the entire position maybe 15 months later. And I remember I was at an airport, reading a transcript of a conference call and just thinking, that was the dumbest thing I could have possibly done. And we bought the entire position back. It was insanely tax inefficient. But I've always kind of prided myself on being able to kind of pull those 180s. And it did just, there was, to an outsider, all of the hard work that you were doing, to a person just, listening to the conference calls and reading the 10Ks, there was this feeling of inevitability about it, and which I'm sure is completely inaccurate, and the reason that a lot of people in my position get situations wrong. One interesting aspect of the dividend question, I'm on this board now where we have a tremendous amount of excess cash. And, we have about 10 to 15% of our investor base is offshore IRAs who pay, full withholding tax on dividend. And then we have some big shareholders who have their stock in tax advantaged accounts. And so it is interesting. You can't please everyone, with these decisions, and that's why governance is hard. You think, well, even if you have a simplistic goal in mind, there, are layers of complexity.
So I just want to comment on his long-term comment, because this is really common in public company leadership. We're a short-term marketplace in the public company world. The average CEO is about 3 years. That's about how long the plan lasts, and therefore that's pretty much how long you should invest. You should invest in a company, right? Because it's going to be a cycle. And I would love to hear us break out of that thinking, as you just described, and say, what if the company's built on a more concrete foundation than a 3-year turnaround and might have some legs on the turnaround. And when we started the Popeyes turnaround, we called it a 10-year legacy. You know, we started saying we're going to build a 10-year legacy, not a 3-year blip. But it's a very different business plan than a 3-year flip. Private equity shows us a lot about the 3-year flip and what they expect. And they literally put a different kind of leadership team in, and they just dial all the metrics up fast, and then they exit and they buy a bigger boat. And that's damaging to good business propositions more often than not. Now, once in a while, there's a bad business proposition, right, where you should take all the costs out because it's gotten goofy and they've got jets and mahogany and all that stuff. But a lot of times it's just kind of a sport. And so I'd really challenge public investors to get longer in their view. Now, right now, there's a lot of talk about that, but not a lot of action, right? There's even big institutional people writing very famous letters about it and then selling out at the first transaction that comes across their desk. So, you know, just really paying attention to the longer view. I think there's money to be made in people that understand that.
Yeah, I mean, there definitely are so many situations where, you know, when you do take that long-term view, like there are, you know, good investment outcomes that can happen. I mean, but the thing that I would say is it's also not just a flaw of kind of like investment perspective. Like I think this is like a very fundamental human nature, a long-term, short-term issue. And I think
it's in our
you see
business
it
school.
at the board level,
Yeah.
at the CEO level, for sure at the shareholder level. And you know, again, like you so often see this lip service to long-term that's very difficult to actually execute on. And as you said earlier, like the executing is the hard part.
That's the hard part.
Is there more time? Like we're probably done, right?
Probably close.
Okay, let's do one last question. Yeah, we're done.
Cheryl, so how you've gone from not competing with Amazon to now competing with Amazon, at least at some level. How do you do that as a hard goods retailer specifically?
Yeah, it's actually one of the most misunderstood things about Pier 1 is that we're being Wayfared or Amazoned. It's not unimportant that they're in the furniture business, but furniture is actually a much smaller part of our business. In the home decor segment, if you have a home decor enthusiast in your home, which many of you do, she is a voracious shopper, bricks and mortar shopper. So this week, Wayfair announced they're looking for property. They've decided they've got to have a touch and feel location. She wants to be in the store. So there have been 500 or 600 bricks and mortar locations built in home decor in the last 5 years, which is not happening anywhere else in the retail sector. And these competitors don't have websites. Pier 1 has a nice website. It's about a third of our business, so we're very much in this space. I would tell you social digital marketing is far more important to us than worrying about Amazon Wayfair. Is really being in a strong relationship-based CRM relationship with our customer. That's really important. But that's one of the things I talk to my shareholders a lot about is don't throw us in the retail swamp of problematic companies. What we did at Pier 1 was very self-inflicted and has very little to do with e-com.
Thank you very much. That was a lot of fun.
It was. Thank you for the good questions.
While we're talking Amazon, I did bring 5 books that if anyone wants to buy one, I can charge you less than Amazon charges.
Really good book.
A gratuitous pitch there. And thanks a lot.
Thank you.